If you've ever wanted a tank that will just make you better in World of Tanks console, then look no further than today's feature, which is the Hydra, and it is a tank that I have definitely underestimated within the game. It was recently gifted to me on my account by Fat Little Bernie, and I really do appreciate that, mate. But in regards to the actual tank and how it can be just devastating even in these tier 10 games, which this video is in, it really can be such a perfect tank. And although it does have some flaws, which we'll get into within this video, it has so many great advantages to it. And in fact, it's mainly to do with the armour of the tank. Now, the armour of the tank being an IS-6, essentially. This is the Hydra IS-6. I should kind of give that overview, which in and of itself is a tier 8 premium tank that was already in the game. It's one of the oldest premium tanks, the IS-6 in particular, and it's a preferential matchmaking tank that can essentially only come up against tier 9s. However, the Hydra version is a souped up version of the standard IS-6 that can come up against tier 10s, and hence why it gets a significant upgrade over the latter version of the tank itself. And that's because this tank in particular has 440 alpha damage, meaning that it can compete with things like the Defender, which have that higher alpha damage, and it also can compete with things like the 50 TP prototype. And considering the armor model is actually not awful on this tank, means that in fact I actually bounce more rounds with this tank than I do with the Defender, with the 50 TP prototype, with a lot of the other heavy tanks at tier 8, especially when coming up against tier 10s. Even tier 10s bounce off of this tank. Is it definitely a thing that happens every single time that you get hit by anyone? No, you don't bounce every single round, but what I mean by this tank has effective armour is that if you wiggle the tank in the right ways, you can make this thing pull off bounces that you would only dream of in other tanks similar to this. And what you're seeing me do here is just take a pretty passive / aggressive position at the beginning of the game, where we can dish out a bit of damage towards some opponents that maybe most people would be feared of if you're playing in a tier 8 tank, and that's against things like the Machine, which for the most part would be horrific to come up against in something like a medium tank or any other heavy tank that doesn't have this 440 alpha damage whack that you can just dish out against opponents. You can see here, firing blind at people is something you can do. One thing I do want to note about this tank is most tanks, if you're playing a heavy, you'd probably think, oh yeah, the problem with it is that it's going to have terrible accuracy. Well, no, the Hydra IS-6 does not have absolutely devastatingly bad accuracy, which means that you can actually hit things that you're aiming at, rather than some of the tanks, as we say that, completely miss a shot on the back of a UDES which would have finished him off. But regardless of that shot, in general, this tank is actually really accurate, and I think that that's something that goes amiss with a lot of the reviews, or at least some of the games, is that having good accuracy can really be the difference between kind of making a tank great and making a tank, you know, mediocre or average. And I think that that's where the Hydra IS-6 in particular comes in really nicely comparatively to things like the Defender, which in my personal opinion has slightly worse accuracy than this tank. And considering the Hydra IS-6 actually got buffs within the game, it can be really fun. One key kind of negative that the Hydra IS-6 has over a lot of the other heavies is that the standard standard penetration is not the best, and that is similar to the IS-6, the standard version. However, this has much more penetration than the IS-6 standard, but it doesn't mean that it's good, and that's something I want to highlight. You can bounce off of tanks, although, you know, for the most part, if you do actually fire your premium rounds as and when needed, rather than just all of the time, you can actually make it work very easily with the standard rounds. And when you're coming up against higher tier vehicles that do actually have armor, you can load the standard or premium rounds depending on what target you're coming up against. So that's not really a problem with this tank, and makes it even more of a reason that you should actually try out this tank, considering that most tanks that you come up against you can pen with this thing. There is no real problem with you actually playing this tank in tier 10 matches, and that's something I see a lot of comments, is that most people complain about playing tier 8 because they're in tier 10 games, but this one you do not need to complain. This tank is fantastic, and in fact, in my personal opinion, playing this tank in a tier 10 game is probably more beneficial because there's more hit points worth of damage that you can farm off of people, and you can always come up against things like the E100, who decided he's going to sit out at least against us, which means that we're just going to go for the tracking shot on a bit of assistance damage within this rather than the actual final blow. But regardless of going for the final blow, we get it anyway, and Amarak the E100 over in the right hand corner there if you want to see that. Pause it and go back or whatever you want to do, but there we have the Foch 155, the final tank left alive on the enemy team. Can we get there before the game ends and secure another enemy down? But it's looking like we probably won't get there, and will we, won't we? 5 damaging points, and we do actually manage to get him. We do finally actually get him there, picking up the victory, and of course a very, very good game in the Hydra i6, very aggressive, and able to do that with the armor model and the actual alpha damage of the tank to just negate even tier 10 tanks that come up against you, because you have more alpha than some of those, especially mediums, although heavy tanks typically have 490 at tier 10. But that's regardless of that. Let's get into another gameplay where of course you can see a really, really good result. Obviously picking up 2,000 base experience with about 20,000 actual experience in this game, with a 5-time string theory operation going on right now in the game. If you're watching it on release, you'll be able to do that as well, and a fantastic way to earn silver as well. With absolutely no boosters to the silver, we managed to pick up 226,000, which is really, really good, and a 6k combined game, which is fantastic. Getting straight into the thick of the next battle, we're going to start a little bit of the way through, 10 seconds in actually, and we're just basically playing on Heilbronn, one of the better maps, I guess, for medium tanks. Unfortunately not playing in a medium tank, so yeah, not particularly the best, but Hydra in essence is a pretty decent and flexible tank, unlike a lot of heavies that have really, really bad gun depression. This one doesn't have the worst gun depression, and it actually is pretty effective since you are fairly low profile. You're not one of these type 5s or something like that in the game, or an Oho or Oni. You can actually use your gun depression to a good effect, and you can do that really, really nicely in this tank, as well as having good turret armor as well, meaning that you can use ridge lines, at least to some degree, without having to expose an inordinate amount of your tank to your opponents. But in this game, it's not necessarily the highest damage result you're ever gonna see in the Hydra i6, but what it does showcase is yet again what it's like playing in tier 10 games, because that is ultimately what I want to showcase this tier 8 to be, and it will be a tank that you do not have to play tier 8 games to have good results. You can play tier 10 games, and I want to reiterate that, because it is really important for those of you who are trying to look for a tank that will actually perform really well and make you look good, even if maybe you're not that good, because, you know, sometimes it's fun to play an overpowered tank, or a tank that just makes it easy mode on World of Tanks, I guess. But you can see what we're doing here is just cresting ridge lines, just being a little bit of a nuisance, to be honest with you, and you can do that in this. You know, you have fairly decent accuracy. We do take a hit there, which is unfortunate, but yeah, again, bouncing a tier 10 round from a medium tank that has very, very good penetration, and that means that, yeah, you are essentially a very, very competitive tier 8 tank, and when you are competitive like this, you're able to do things that maybe other tier 8 premiums would only dream of, and even tech tree vehicles, or even the best tech tree vehicles, wouldn't be able to do. Bit of bad aim there, but I think the key message with this tank is that you have enough armor that you can, if played well, bounce a lot of rounds, albeit, you know, sometimes you will take a hit, or maybe you'll be in the wrong position or something like that, that doesn't help. But yeah, if you definitely prioritize the targets that you're going to be facing, then you can have a really, really good game. And talking about really good game and just being able to keep yourself in a position where you can basically outtrade a lot of opponents that you'll be coming up against. Well, we're on 859 hit points after taking a hit from the M48A2 120 mil there, which is a tier 10 medium for the American line, and albeit we're in a tier 8 tank which has less hit points anyway, that has much better DPM, So in all regards, you would expect to be getting taken out very quickly, but considering the Hydra actually has good enough armour to bounce rounds when actually put in the right position, some tier 8 heavies, just regardless of where you actually put them on the map, whether you hold down, etc., will just come up against tier 10s and get penned in all areas of the armour, which makes it really, really difficult for you to be able to pull off games like this where you can hold your own against tier 10 vehicles. And it's just another reason why I think it's really, really important for you guys to really understand that sometimes it is tank selection that will avoid you having these terrible games, and especially in the current kind of set state of the game where you can actually do the string theory operation. You're wanting to actually be the most competitive you can possibly be to get string a couple of wins and then jump in one of your tech tree vehicles that maybe you want to boost through, which I would recommend. You know, if you're playing an overpowered tank, get a couple of wins together and then jump over into your tech tree vehicle, in which you can hope that you're going to be able to deal maybe more damage, or maybe you'll be able to string that last win to be able to push you over the kind of bad areas that maybe the tank is in. And we are 8-5 in this game, and I'm going to let you into a secret. We lose, and that is primarily because of some bad plays by a couple of people, including myself. Maybe I could have played a little bit better, but it's not the end of the world. And you can see here we're kind of moving down. Unfortunately, we spot the M48 in the worst position possible, and then we get stuck on the bridge because typical hitboxes of things. But you're about to see the armor model once again working against a tier 10 that look like they're firing premium, and that is something I've really enjoyed about the Hydra. And although we'll probably take a hit here, which we do, having taken a heat round there, we managed to dish out 440. So if this man was to basically trade 1 for 1 with our tank, we'd still be able to outtrade him 9 times out of 10. And so in this sort of position, I'm kind of hoping that my team are going to come, because this guy could easily YOLO me. That one shot of damage could take me out from the game, and that would be it. That would be a game over. And this is where, you know, in a tank like this, you can hold your own. Bouncing yet again another round, and these are the sort of engagements where the Hydra just is such a nuisance to all of the tanks. You know, we've got a heavy tank behind us. It's a chieftain. I'm going to let you into that. Of course, you can't see that in the game currently, but I was waiting, hoping that this guy would actually help me out within this game, but apparently not. Just got to wait and around for about a couple of minutes. We'll skip forward to where the actual engagement happens here, because otherwise we'll be waiting around for some time. And basically, like a minute later, this guy actually comes forward and makes a bit of a play, which is really, really good, helpful, at least finally. And then, like literally like a minute later, we'll skip forward a little bit later on. And essentially there's a type 5. I make a bit of a misplay by kind of stopping against him. I thought I could get behind the behind the hill and then kind of get into a good position. Type 5 just coming around the corner, obviously doesn't have to aim when you've got a derp gun, so yeah, manages to finish off the last 54 hit points remaining of our team. And then this chieftain that was reluctant to actually help out, just going for the artillery. He's not even bothering with the type 4 that sat behind him, or type 5 that sat behind him. Not even gonna try and move out of the way, just gets penned in the back and set on fire, and then basically just finished off from there. And the game just ends slowly and surely as we throw away an 8-4 lead, which is disappointing, but there we go. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video and showcased how nice the Hydra IS-6 is. You can currently pick it up in the store if you did actually want to get it, but it is part of a very big bundle that you have to spend quite a lot of money to actually purchase, but sometimes it will come on sale at 50% off and in various different sales along the way. So if you do manage to pick up this tank, you won't regret it, and if it does come on sale on its own, I really strongly recommend you actually pick it up if you want a competitive, really good tank within World of Tanks console. Thank you very much for watching. Check out some of the other gameplay reviews and tank reviews of similar sort of tanks within World of Tanks console, and I will see you there. Goodbye.